Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before we even get into the meat of today's topic, and trust me, there is a lot of meat on this bone, I have a quick favor to ask.
Yeah, please do.
If you value what we do here,
Yeah.
taking these massive, sometimes controversial, often forbidden topics and breaking them down so you don't have to read 1,000 pages, please hit that like and subscribe button right now.
It really is the best way to support the show.
Exactly. It helps us keep the lights on and allows us to keep bringing you this kind of heavy-hitting content that you probably won't hear in the mainstream.
And for today's deep dive, we are definitely going into some territory that is, well, let's just say it's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not.
We're reviewing a new ebook that is available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's titled Leftist Poison Pill Identity Politics, Bad Faith Arguments, Feminist Marxist Resentment Ideology, and Anti-Western Civilization Animus.
I mean, the title alone is a mouthful.
Yeah.
The author is Conrad Riker. And just looking at that title, this isn't going to be a polite, middle-of-the-road discussion about tax policy.
No, absolutely not. Riker frames this book as a truth bomb. And we should be clear up front, our goal today isn't to take sides or endorse the viewpoints.
Right. We're just here to impartially report on what's inside the book.
Exactly. We're laying out his arguments for you to examine. He explicitly states this book is designed for men, and really anyone who feels like the world is being actively rewritten against them.
So if you've been feeling like reality is shifting under your feet, or that you're being silenced in the workplace, or that the rules of society have suddenly inverted, Riker is arguing that you aren't crazy.
Right. His premise is that you aren't imagining it. According to the book, you're just noticing a calculated dismantling of Western institutions.
And that's the core premise we're exploring today. He's talking about how places like universities, corporations, HR departments, the family unit, how all of it is being captured by what he calls feminist Marxist ideology.
So if you are that guy who is confused by why HR suddenly runs your life, or why merit seems to be treated like a hate crime now, this deep dive is going to be incredibly relevant.
Yeah, we're going to trace what Riker calls the rot.
We'll look at the lie of institutional neutrality, the weaponization of language, this concept he calls the infant predator schema, the death of the father, and finally his solution, which involves a return to classical education through the trivium.
It's a dense book, but we're going to unpack it layer by layer. Let's start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Riker opens with this concept that institutions, places like universities or government bodies, are not neutral, even though they claim to be.
Right. We tend to think, okay, a bathroom is just a bathroom. A university is just for learning. But Riker argues that neutrality is actually a trap.
A trap? How so?
Well, his argument is that neutrality is a lie when one side wields language as a weapon. If you stay neutral while someone else is actively rewriting the definitions of words, you lose by default. To illustrate this, he uses a very specific, detailed example from the University of Ottawa back in 2015. He calls it the era of bathroom communism.
Bathroom communism. That is a phrase I have not heard before. Walk us through what happened there.
So the university decided to mandate gender-neutral washrooms across the campus.
Which sounds pretty standard for a modern policy update, right?
On the surface, yeah. But Riker digs into the how and the why. They didn't just change the signs on the doors. According to the book, they rebranded urinals as inclusion zones.
Wait, they actually called a urinal an inclusion zone?
Yes, and the stalls were labeled as safe spaces for gender exploration.
You've got to be kidding me.
According to the documents Riker cites, that's exactly what happened, and this is where his feminist Marxist critique comes in. He points out they hired a diversity consultant to design this policy.
Okay, so they brought in an external expert.
Right, but not just any expert. This wasn't a facility manager making a call. They brought this person in at a rate of $15,000 a day.
15 grand a day. Who is this person?
This is where it gets bizarre. Riker notes that this specific consultant had previously worked on socialist housing programs in Venezuela.
Wait, what?
Yeah, programs that literally collapsed due to poor construction and corruption.
So, Riker's point is, you have a failed architect of socialist housing who destroyed infrastructure in South America, now being paid a fortune to deconstruct bathroom norms in a Canadian university.
Exactly. It's a strange transferable skill set. But Riker argues this isn't accidental at all. It's about the allocation of resources.
A Marxist part of the equation.
Precisely.
Uh-huh.
Riker points out that the university take a $400,000 budget from mental health services.
Wow.
Yeah, money meant for students with depression, anxiety, actual clinical needs, and funneled it into these bathroom retrofits.
Unbelievable. Did the students even want this?
Well, internal surveys showed that 87% of students didn't use the new facilities and didn't care about them.
So they stripped funding from actual care to pay for ideological architecture.
Correct. And the poison pill, as he calls it, comes in with how they enforced it. There's this anecdote about a janitor, a guy who had cleaned those restrooms for 17 years.
Okay.
He was formally reprimanded for using bleach.
Breach for cleaning a bathroom. Why?
The administration claimed the smell of bleach triggered trauma in gender-fluid individuals because it represented, quote, sanitized sterility, unquote, which they associated with the erasure of non-binary identities.
That sounds like pure satire. You're saying a janitor got in trouble for cleaning a bathroom because cleanliness was offensive?
In that specific ideological framework, yes. Riker uses this to explain that the goal isn't hygiene. The goal is compliance.
Me.
He calls it a bureaucratic exorcism where logic is cast out. If they can force you to accept that cleaning a toilet is an act of aggression, they have broken your ability to distinguish reality.
You are now a subject of the ideology.
Exactly.
And Riker argues this compliance testing doesn't span the university bathroom, it migrates.
Oh, absolutely migrates.
Which brings us to the section he calls merit as a crime. And for anyone listening who works in tech, engineering, or high-performance fields, this is probably the part that's going to hit closest to home.
This is the economic argument of the book. Riker posits that equity, which is the massive corporate buzzword of the decade, is functionally enforced mediocrity.
Enforced mediocrity.
Yeah. He argues that in a system obsessed with identity, competence actually becomes a threat. He cites the example of a senior engineer at Intel.
I remember this one from the book. The MIT grad, right?
Yes. MIT graduate, 4.0 GPA, an absolutely brilliant coder. He was demoted.
For bad code.
Not at all. Not for missing a deadline either. He was demoted for refusing to use gender-neutral pronouns in internal team meetings.
Just for that.
Yeah, he simply stated, I will call people by their names. I'm here to write code.
And that was enough to tank his career.
It was. He eventually left the company and moved to Estonia. Riker quotes him saying, I didn't leave my job, I left the ideology.
Wow. But there's a darker example in the book involving Boeing, isn't there?
Yes, and this one felt dangerous because we're talking about commercial airplanes here.
Yeah.
A Boeing engineer was reprimanded for toxic competitiveness.
Toxic competitiveness. What did he do?
His offense was that he solved a critical technical problem regarding wing stress significantly faster than a female colleague who was working on the same issue.
Hold on. In engineering, isn't solving the problem fast and accurately the entire point of the job? How is that toxic?
Well, under the framework Riker describes, competence creates hierarchy. And if that hierarchy doesn't align with the desired identity politics, the competence must be punished.
That is wild.
He argues that the engineer's success made the colleague feel unsafe or inadequate, and therefore his competence was framed as an act of aggression.
This leads right into that psychological concept Riker introduces, the infant predator schema. I think we need to break this down because it explains the mindset behind all these HR decisions.
It's a crucial part of the book. Riker argues that the modern woke worldview, which is his term, splits humanity into two distinct biological castes.
Okay, two castes.
There is no middle ground. On one side, you have infants. These are the protected groups, minorities, women, LGBTQ individuals, basically anyone covered by DEI initiatives. In this worldview, they are viewed as lacking agency, constantly vulnerable, and in need of perpetual protection from the state or the corporation.
Okay, so they are infantilized. And on the other side?
You have the predators. These are competent men, specifically white or Western men, but really anyone who succeeds via traditional merit.
I see.
Riker argues that in this schema, if you are strong, capable, or successful, you are by default a predator. Your success is viewed as proof that you have exploited an infant.
So it's a zero-sum game. If I win, I must have stolen it from someone else.
Precisely. Riker calls it reverse Darwinism. Instead of survival of the fittest, we have the punishment of the strong to appease the weak.
And he warns about the consequences of this.
Yeah, he says this is actively killing Western civilization because we are disincentivizing the very people who keep the lights on, the bridges standing, and the code running.
And the tool they use to enforce this is language. This is the weaponization of language section of the book. Riker calls them the pronoun police, but he goes a lot deeper than just the annoyance of email signatures.
He treats it as a cognitive weapon. Riker cites a study claiming that the mandatory use of the singular they reduces reading comprehension and pattern recognition in the brain.
Wait, it actually affects brain function?
According to the research he cites, yes. He argues it's mandated specifically to break your cognitive categories. If you can't distinguish between one and many or he and she, your ability to process reality degrades.
You become easier to manipulate.
Exactly.
He gave that example from a Toronto kindergarten that really crept me out. The sunshine and moonbeams thing.
Yeah, that was a school that banned the words boys and girls in the classroom. They replaced them with sunshine and moonbeams.
Sunshine and moonbeams.
Riker calls this linguistic brainwashing. The argument is that they are detaching children from biological reality before they can even read. If you erase the category of boy effectively enough, you erase the future man.
But out of the corporate world, they don't use sunshine and moonbeams. They use HR. Riker talks about the gossip network.
This is a very sharp critique of corporate structure. Riker notes that HR departments are statistically female-dominated.
Right.
And he argues they have weaponized what he calls female-led social control, which is primarily gossip and reputation destruction. He shares the story of a man fired for laughing, just laughing, at a pronoun joke in a private Slack channel.
Private, so they were monitoring direct messages.
Someone screenshotted it. The company spent $120,000 in legal fees defending that termination.
120 grand for a laugh.
Riker points out that the cost didn't matter to them. It was a ritual sacrifice to the empathy hoax.
Define the empathy hoax for the listener.
It's the idea that empathy is used as a tool for emotional tyranny. If someone says, "I don't feel safe," that statement becomes a trump card.
Right, it just shuts down the conversation.
Completely. It overrides logic, evidence, and due process. It doesn't matter if you are objectively right. It matters if you made someone feel bad.
So feelings dictate reality.
Yeah, and Riker argues this feminizes the workplace to a degree that makes it impossible for men to function authentically.
I don't feel safe is basically the modern equivalent of off with his head.
Yeah.
And speaking of head games, let's talk about mental health. Riker mentions the therapy state.
He discusses a male behavior assessment tool used at the University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
This tool flags high GPA, leadership qualities, and competitive sports participation as dominance risks.
So doing well in school and being a captain of the football team is now a risk factor.
According to this tool, yes. It pathologizes masculinity. Riker talks about stoicism as pathology. The traits that built the West, emotional control, endurance, stoicism, they are now diagnosed as problems.
Problems that need to be cured.
Right. The goal is to medicate the masculinity out of men and turn them into what Riker calls compliant clients of the therapy state.
Man, this flows right into what I felt was the heaviest part of the book, which is the death of the father. Riker argues there is a concerted legal and cultural effort to erase fatherhood entirely.
The statistics he pulls here are staggering, and he uses them to highlight the anti-male animus mentioned in the title.
Yeah, the deadbeat dad stats.
Right. He compares the media usage of the term deadbeat dad versus deadbeat mom. Deadbeat dad appears in media tracking about 8 million times a year.
8 million. And deadbeat mom.
Only 12,000 times.
That is a massive, massive disparity. Does he attribute that just to media bias?
He attributes it to deliberate narrative construction. He points out that women initiate 70% of divorces, yet the cultural narrative is always that men are abandoning families. Riker argues this is designed to make men look disposable. He details a government-funded program in Canada called Fathers in Prison.
What goes on in those workshops?
Yeah.
Because the name sounds like it should be rehabilitative.
You'd think it would be about helping them reconnect with their kids, but Riker reviewed the curriculum. The workshops are actually designed to make these men accept their disposability.
What do you mean by that?
They are taught that their children are likely better off without their toxic influence, and that the best thing they can do is pay the state and stay away.
That is incredibly bleak. It's basically telling men your only value is your wallet, otherwise disappear.
It ties into his broader view on intersectionality. He calls it a Ponzi scheme of victimhood.
A Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, he argues that feminism mutated. It went from seeking legal equality, which Riker says was historically valid, to a war on biology.
Right.
He critiques the Me Too movement as a purge. He notes the 97% male target rate and argues that due process was abandoned to remove men from power and replace them with the infants from that schema we discussed earlier.
Okay, so we painted a pretty dark picture here. Bathroom communism, merit is a crime, language is a weapon, and fathers are being actively erased.
It's heavy.
If you stop reading there, you'd probably just want to go live in a cave. But Riker does offer a solution. He calls it rebuilding the West.
He does. And this is where the book pivots from complaint to strategy. His solution isn't to go protest in the street. He argues that's playing their game on their terms.
So what is his solution?
It's deeply intellectual. He focuses on the trivium.
The trivium. That's an old classical education concept. Logic, rhetoric, and grammar.
Exactly. Riker's argument is you cannot fight this with feelings. You must fight it with superior thinking. He calls logic the penicillin of the mind.
Okay, but how does that actually work in the real world? Can you walk us through a practical example from the book? Let's say I'm in a corporate meeting and someone hits me with one of these woke arguments. How does the trivium help me?
Great question. Riker actually breaks this down step by step. Let's take the inclusion zone bathroom example from earlier.
Right on.
First, you apply grammar. Now, grammar isn't just commas and syntax, it's defining terms. Riker says you simply ask, what is the specific definition of an inclusion zone, and how does it functionally differ from a urinal?
Oh, I like that. You force them to clearly define their terms.
Right. And usually, they can't, without sounding ridiculous.
Okay, so you pin them down on definitions. Then what?
Then you apply logic. You look for the fallacy. In this case, it's usually an emotional fallacy, the idea that safety requires renaming a piece of plumbing.
So you dismantle that causal link.
Exactly. You ask, how does changing the name of a ceramic fixture actually increase physical safety?
And finally, rhetoric.
Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. Riker warns men not to get angry. The moment you get angry, you fit the predator stereotype they want you to fit.
Right, you play right into their hands.
Instead, you use rhetoric to calmly expose the absurdity to the audience, not to the opponent. You ask the room, is allocating $400,000 from mental health services to rename fixtures the most compassionate use of our limited funds?
Wow, so you turn their own weapon, compassion, right against them.
Exactly.
I see. So you aren't fighting on their emotional turf, you are dragging them onto your intellectual turf.
You got it. And Riker cites a Stanford study claiming that students trained in formal logic were 73% less likely to fall for what he calls woke propaganda.
73%.
Yeah, it implies that this entire ideology relies entirely on you not being able to think clearly.
He also points to a real-world example of a country doing this differently, right? Hungary.
Yes, and while this is controversial in the mainstream, Riker strongly praises the Hungarian approach to childhood education.
What are they doing differently?
He notes that instead of teaching gender theory, their curriculum focuses on nature, farming, and biology, teaching kids about farm animals, seasons, and crops.
Just basic physical reality.
Right. He argues that grounding kids in the physical realities of nature makes them immune to the virtual realities of identity politics. He sees their investment in the traditional family unit as the only viable counterexample to Western decay.
Grounding them in reality. That makes a lot of sense. Finally, we have to touch on the epilogue of the book. Riker gets very personal here. He speaks directly to the reader.
He does. He pivots entirely to personal responsibility. He tells the reader, stop apologizing. Stop validating emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
He has this one line that really stuck with me. He says, you are not a project for someone else's healing.
You are not a project for someone else's healing. That is powerful. Meaning, you aren't a resource for someone else to consume just to make themselves feel better.
Exactly. He's telling men to opt out of the guilt game entirely, to reclaim their own minds and their own dignity. He says the system is designed to make you feel like a villain, but you have the power to simply refuse that role.
So bringing it all together, Riker's message is that the West isn't dead yet, but it has been heavily poisoned. And this book, Leftist Poison Pill Identity Politics, claims to be the antidote.
It really is a surgical strike. He's not trying to debate the other side. He's trying to expose them as frauds and give men the practical tools to dismantle the arguments in real time.
Well, if this deep dive resonated with you, if you felt that spark of, finally, someone actually said it, you really need to get the full arsenal. We've only scratched the surface of the data and the arguments he presents.
There's so much more in there.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy the ebook. It's Leftist Poison Pill Identity Politics, Bad Faith Arguments, Feminist Marxist Resentment Ideology, and Anti-Western Civilization Animus by Conrad Riker.
It's a long title, but it's an important book. And if you want to keep up with his ongoing analysis, because he is constantly putting out new essays on this kind of institutional capture, make sure you follow him at Conrad Rand Riker on Substack.
Definitely do that. Look, these deep dives are about finding the forbidden knowledge, the stuff you aren't supposed to talk about in polite company. So make sure you like and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next one. We're going to keep digging where others won't.
And remember Riker's final thought from the book. The truth is not a movement. The truth simply is.
The truth simply is. And maybe it's time we start asking ourselves how much of our own reality we've surrendered just to keep the peace. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.